Hey guys, welcome back to Stormin' Outdoors. Today I'm faced with a challenge of catching 5 tournament quality bass out of a lake that I have never been to. This particular challenge will be, fairly challenging as we are well into the dog days of summer. To make things even more challenging, I will not be using forward-facing sonar. Am I up to the task? Well, things went about as well as you might expect. Today we're going to look at potentially what went wrong. Let's get into it. Okay, so the venue for tomorrow's challenge is going to be the Great Lake in southwest Arkansas. It is notorious for being a fairly tough bass fishery. It has both largemouth and spotted bass present in the lake. This lake is also known for being extremely deep, extremely clear, and is also known as perhaps one of the most pressured fisheries in the region. Now, jumping to the latest fishing reports on the lake, John Duncan of Yo-Yo Guide Service gave us some pretty decent information. The water temperature is running from the mid-70s to around 80 degrees by mid-afternoon. Now you go back a week even further than that, another angler stated that he's caught largemouth and spotted bass mainly on spoons and a shad pattern hair jig in about 15 to 20 feet of water on ledges and brush piles. So if you go to the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission website, they have this page dedicated to fish attractors, which are many different brush piles, trees, PVC pipe style attractors that the Game and Fish Commission and places on their lakes. They even have a video explaining how to download these fish attractors GPS files to your fish finder. Also, if you scroll down further, you can find the different files for your lake. They also have available a interactive map where you can scroll and look at where the different fish attractors are located at. So if we zoom in here to the Great Lake, you'll see all these blue icons pop up, and if you click on one such blue icon, it will give you information about where it's located, including the type of structure. In this case, this one is a cane or bamboo pile that's placed near the dam, and then it gives you latitude and longitude coordinates. I actually did this the hard way, and I entered in each of those coordinate pairs manually into my Navionics app on my phone. I have a Hummingbird Helix 5 on my boat, but I just decided to do things the hard way. And so, as you can see, I have about 20 or so brush piles and cane piles that I plan to try to fish over the course of the day. And with that, let's get on the water. Alright, so when I first got to the Great Lake, I put in near the dam. And the very first thing I noticed was exactly just how clear this lake was. There were several places, where you can be in 10 feet of water, 15 feet of water, and you can look over the side of the boat and actually see the bottom. I noticed immediately that the conditions that morning were, fairly calm, but also really foggy and overcast. So my first intuition is that if there is a shallow bite present, this opportunity for that might be on this particular morning because of those overcast conditions. Another thing I noticed after I launched the boat, I noticed that the water temperature on my graph was reading 87 degrees, which is far warmer than the 70 to 80 degree range that the fishing report from a few days earlier had provided. So then the next thing I did was that I checked to see where the thermocline was, which you can do so on a Hummingbird Helix graph like the one that I have, just by turning up the sensitivity on the graph way up. And near the top of the water column, you'll see where it's fairly clear of clutter, but then also you see a strong return towards the bottom. And that line between where the signal-free area is and where the cluttered area on the graph is, that's the thermocline. That's the boundary between the well-mixed and oxygenated water near the surface and the dense, not well-mixed, and oxygen-deficient portion of the water column. And fish generally will not be able to survive below that. And so that is as deep as I wanted to fish. And that turned out to be anywhere between 30 to 35 and maybe even as deep as 40 feet deep. And then I expected later on in the day, I did expect the clouds to clear up or sunny and maybe even a little bit of breezy conditions, later on in the day. And so my plan was that I wanted to start shallow and then see if there is shallow bite that might be there or any aggressive fish that might be up shallow, chasing bait and bluegill, and then eventually work my way deep. to fish the brush piles and cane piles we discussed earlier. The first place I pulled up to was Rip Rap Bank, which is just a rocky bank, and I thought this might be a good area to explore because these are generally the types of areas where bait fish will have a good hard bottom to spawn on. And hindsight 2020, the water temperatures were probably too warm for this, and therefore it was probably too late in the year for any shad spawn activity to be going on. But despite that, I thought this could still be a good opportunity just to see if anything at all was happening. So I started out on this riprap bank fishing the top water to see if I can take advantage of any aggressive fish. Nothing really happened, and so I moved on to the next adjacent point.
And certainly the lake's a little bit high right now. It's gone down. It was really high in the spring, and the water's come down a couple feet in the last couple days. So these fish may not be pulled up shallow. They may be pulled off a little bit. Plus the surface temperature is nearly 90 degrees, and these fish just flat out just may not be comfortable up here. But you never know. This is probably going to be the most pressured point on the entire lake. Just because, oh my gosh. All right, one just missed it. Just came up behind it. Could be a striper or something though. I mean, I know they got those in here.
And so I continued down the bank. I continued fishing the top water. Just maybe I could have fished a chatterbait. After fishing around that point and fishing that shallow water, I wasn't seeing a lot of activity. I didn't see a lot of fish other than the one that came up behind my popper. Instead, so I started to transition to fishing points and islands, just places where I think maybe fish would school up on bait fish, because that has been a staple pattern for that particular time of the year.
Oh yeah. Those are bass.
I did see some schooling fish. Couldn't tell if they were actually bass or not. They could have just been stripers or hybrids or some kind of white bass. And so I decided to move on, and I started fishing the brush piles. And my plan was to hit and then fish as many of them as I could throughout the course of the day.
Oh, well, something definitely had it. However little he might have been, but something definitely had it.
After fishing that pile for a while, I went on and continued to graph other spots, other areas where there could have been other brush piles and cane piles, and it took a long time. I continuously just went over pile after pile without really seeing any evidence of fish being present, until finally I ran over one where it looked like maybe there's a couple dots on it. I was like, okay, I throw the drop shot in there, and almost immediately.
Oh my goodness, I'm embarrassing myself here. Well, I managed one. Non-keeper, but it is a fish. That was embarrassing. We did get one.
I ran more brush piles and more cane piles, and I just could not get anything going. And so I decided to go and fish this island, kind of in the main lake. Again, another place where fish are likely to push bait fish onto, and as an ambush point. And in this particular island had two different cane piles on it, and so I thought I would knock out two birds with one stone by fishing this area. And I saw actually some schooling activity not long after I stopped there, but it was very sporadic. This group of fish, again, not sure if they were bass or if they were hybrid or stripers, but they would come up to the surface once every few minutes, busting on baits fish before going back down. And they actually proved, without live scope, to be very difficult to target. A couple of them came up and missed the top water from behind, and I just wasn't sure what was wrong with my presentation. Perhaps the top water I was using was just too big. Maybe it wasn't translucent enough because we had bluebird skies or bright sunny skies and very clear water, and these fish were just getting a too good of a look at my lure, or maybe they were too small to even eat it to begin with. I wasn't sure, so I tried out the Namiki rig. No success there, and so then I decided to fish the cane piles.
Oh, that was a fish. All right. It's definitely appearing like there's definitely some here.
So then after that, I continued to fish that area, and then I ran out of time for the day. And so the challenge I set up for myself was to catch 5 caliber bass, and I didn't even catch one. I caught one fish, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't even a keeper. So what were some of the things, maybe I learned, maybe I, looking back on, what could I have done differently? One of the things I thought about was that I spent far more time fishing than I did graphing. For the most part, when I ran over a spot in a brush pile and I couldn't tell if there was a fish on it or not, I would go ahead and fish it anyway. And this ended up taking a lot of my time, and I was probably fishing a lot of dead water by doing this. Another thing was my tackle selection and my bait selection, I think, were not exactly on point. I've only ever seen water that clear one other time in my life. I thought maybe the line sizes I were using was too big. You can see throughout the course of the video that I'm using a bait cast for the drop shot, but that's because I'm used to fishing at places like Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn. But for the most part, fishing that really clear water, I just think the line diameter was just simply too big. The other thing is that the actual drop shot worm itself, I was using a 7-inch worm. Maybe I was fishing an area of the lake that was very highly pressured, so I should have downsized. And then the other thing is that we discussed this earlier with the schooling fish, was just they did not commit to my topwater lure. There are probably other techniques that I probably could have tried besides the topwater and a Namiki rig without the live scope to try to target these fish. One could have been with a crankbait, or maybe even perhaps a spy bait, which I didn't have on me at the time. Some people might say swim bait, or a jerk bait or something. Boat positioning was also an issue. I don't have an old Trex or a spot lock trolling motor to keep me in one spot. I had to do everything manually, and I'm learning all this for the first time about gauging where the waypoint is relative where it is on your graph to where your boat is, and then trying to line the boat up, face it into the wind, so you can hold it in the same spot easier, and then actually find where the cast is, and then make that same cast over and over and over again. And I just had difficulty, controlling the boat to be able to make that cast. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you like this kind of content, please consider liking and subscribing, and also just let me know in the comments maybe what you think maybe I should have done different. Thanks again for watching, and tight lines.